We're going to be in Exodus chapter 20. Exodus 20, we'll read the first 17 verses. Then God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness, of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. You shall remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Okay, what do you think about that? Yes, mostly thou shalt not rather than thou shalt, but we'll talk about that a little more.
I went to print this out, and I thought my printer had broken. All I saw was the first 2 pages. And the thing just kept spitting out paper. It's going to take us a while to get through this.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
That's all up to y'all.
I think he starts out again by reminding them that he was the one that brought them out of Egypt, and then he kind of sets the, I guess his authority says, you shall have no other gods before me, don't make any carved image and stuff like that, and then starts going down into the things that the people should avoid.
It sets the parameters, or codifies really the parameters between Israel and God before it does anything else. This is the relationship. These are the terms of the relationship that you're going to have with me. Not all of them. They're going to get into a lot more precise commandments regarding the worship and everything. But this is not just their kind of personal theological religion. This is their civil religion too. This is how they will exist as a society, and they exist as a society by, through, in, with, alongside of God, alongside Yahweh. So it's not, there's some controversy that rears its ugly head every now and then. They'll find a courthouse somewhere in America or a school building somewhere in America that has the 10 Commandments on it. And after a few lawsuits and all that, usually the 10 Commandments come a-tumbling down. Some people get really upset about that. And it's understandable because this is kind of not just for their worship, this is their civil code, civil relationship, civil religion as well. And it's a big part historically of America's civil religion. We have a civil religion. We have what we do and believe and practice in our own lives and our own faith. And then we have kind of what we expect and how we relate to our neighbors and how the code we expect other people to live by. Not just the particular, all the laws and statutes and everything all the little code numbers that Terry memorized and could write you up on all of those 1027 42 53-92, and that's one of those, is it? Well, they're going to throw the book at him. But just the general principle. And we had that in America, we had it for so long, and it was so wonderful, I guess, for a lot of folks, in that this is what controlled what was in the movies. This is what controlled what was in television. This is what was in the songs on the radio. And a lot of people were very comfortable. You could put your kids down in front of the television, turn the TV on, and go cook dinner. You didn't have to worry about what was going to come across the airwaves. Of course, there were only 3 or 4 channels at the time. That kind of helped. But now, I don't know that people have that confidence. Maybe they still do that kind of out of necessity rather than really being what they want to do. But the idea of the 10 Commandments being a part of our civil religion is uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's uncomfortable for me, for people to get so mad that it's taken down from the courthouse, and that you ask them where it's at in the Bible, and they're going to have to get their phones out and Google it. They're not going to know. They want to be able to find it in the courthouse, but they can't find it in the Bible. So but that's not too big a deal, really. I mean, the fact that it has a place in daily life, in daily society, is what it was intended to do. I mean, this is ultimately the kind of the bare bones structure of Israel's relating to one another as they relate to God as well. So it begins with God, though. Yes, sir.
They had a history of 400 years of living in a place that was not doing what God wanted them to do. And so they had, now all of a sudden they're free from that. They needed guidelines for them to have a way to be other than what they'd come to know for 400 years of idols. And there had to be some guidelines to help make them different, other than just God saying, "You're my people." They had to have something to set them apart from the other people that they lived around for 400 years.
For societies, nations, states, counties, cities to exist, we at least believe there needs to be some written standard of conduct, some code by which people can be held, or to which people can be held, and say you need to adhere to these requirements in order for our functioning society to function, to continue to function. And I think that's one of the things about this text, is that a lot of times we feel like Israel flows out of the 10 Commandments, but Israel flows out of Egypt. They flow out of the Exodus. They flow out of God's free gift of salvation, of emancipation from slavery. And they are brought to this as a nation. They are brought to this. This is not so much to create Israel, it is to protect Israel. It is to have a sustainable society. That if you don't have rules or regulations, the theory at least is that you won't last long as a society. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. I think sometimes we have way too many rules and regulations. We were worshiping at a congregation in Issaquah, and nice folks, and they wanted to do something really nice for the homeless people. So they all wanted to get together and make a bunch of sack lunches and stuff like that, and just go take it to the homeless people in Seattle. Sounds like a good idea, sure. You're giving people homemade food rather than a lot of them probably getting it out of the dumpster. But it is strictly illegal in Seattle. You have to go through all the hoops, all the regulations. It has to be prepared by people with food handling licenses and all that stuff. So it's not that the better and the more rules you have, ultimately the better society you will have all the time. But it's just the kind of the nature of humans. We need rules, we need some structure, and if we don't have any, we'll probably, the strong will always oppress the weak. So. Any other thoughts on the overall Ten Commandments? Yes, sir.
This is both a question and a comment. Starting with verse 5 through verse 7. And I understand what's happening in verse 5. It said he's a jealous God, so he's going to bow down and worship. And then how he's going to react to it, visiting the iniquity of the father's own children. And then verse 6, but showing steadfast love. And finally, when I get to verse 7, we shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And I'm wondering if I'm reading it right and what I've been instructed. Because as I read the previous verses, it doesn't sound like it's really saying, you hear somebody use the word God damn it. But yeah, is that what that's really talking about here? Or is it talking about people that are actually out worshiping another God and doing in their life, showing that they don't really believe in the God?
Okay.
I'm kind of off a little bit on my understanding of that verse, that last verse that I read there.
Okay.
What does that really say?
Well, we'll get to it, but that is it's about the specificity of not taking the name of the Lord your God in vain. It has a lot of times in our culture or whatever become a magic word. You can't say, one of the words you can't say on television, which I think they do say on television these days. So it's I don't watch a lot of TV, live TV networks. I watch football, and nobody ever cusses at a football game, so that's good. Yeah, every now and then they'll have a hot mic on the sideline or something like that. But that's a good issue. That's a good point, and I think we have kind of missed the boat on that a little bit. To
stress something in such a way that it applies today, but with that full meaning of what the Bible has.
that it has what we do, and I think a lot of things in the Bible is we define it in a way that it has a very narrow focus, and that focus will never be on us. We'll never take the name of the Lord in vain because we don't use those magic words. And there is, at the same time, there is something not magical, but sacred in Israel about the name of God. And to profane it is to use it commonly. And we've talked about this a little bit before, how they didn't want to take it in vain, so they didn't use it at all. And when you don't use it at all, the pronunciation and all that gets lost for centuries, millennia. Basically, we didn't know exactly how they pronounced it. So at least in the Western Christian experience, at some point, somebody that was a Christian said, "You know what? Maybe we ought to talk to some of these Jewish folks about the Old Testament instead of just trying to figure out what it means to us." And that seemed like a good idea. Somebody even observed that Jesus wasn't a Christian, that he was a Jew. So I said, "Oh, no, he was a Muslim. That's what he was." So
Anyway, it's fascinating too. Sometimes having read these items, and that's why I appreciate your comments on the freedom of the law. That as a previous lawyer and studying the law, your ideas. So, and then here in this body, we have different people with different backgrounds, and it seems to open it up. And I think the same thing here. There's times when we miss something because we don't live in that time, we haven't experienced the thing about women and their place in society is so different today.
mm-hmm.
In a lot of respects. In other respects, it's not the same. It is the same, but in a lot of respects, they're saying now today that a woman then would even think of doing it. Especially American women, the places in my home.
Mm-hmm.
I see that the more understanding I can get something like this of the time of the society and so forth, seems like I can get a better understanding of things without.
And it's difficult for some people to accept that some of these laws came from or pre-existed Israel, I guess is the best way to put it. That there were other ancient cultures that had similar written, codified is the term for taking a kind of oral or understood statement or belief and putting it in writing. And there's a saying in legal circles, when you put a contract, when it goes from oral to a written contract, you reduce it to writing. And whenever you put something in writing, you kind of reduce it a little bit. You know, you can't take up all of the nuance, all of the varied little memories and ideas and understandings that are in everybody's mind when it's spoken to them. You can't put that when you write it down. And the thing about writing it down, though, is you can go back to it and it endures. So we have to be careful that we render it kind of stale or see this, even this list, as a set of do's and don'ts. As Mark said, there's a lot of thou shalt nots, a couple of thou shalls. But it's really, I don't think, intended to be do this and don't do that. It is really intended to say, this is how we will relate to each other, and this is how you will relate to each other. And the negatives, and most of them are negative. 8 of the 10 commandments given are not. Don't do this. But what is the positive? What is the positive flip side of that? What does it mean to not do this? What does it mean to do something as a result of not doing this? If your dad tells you on his way out to work in the morning, don't forget to mow the lawn. Dad, I remembered to mow the lawn. I didn't do it, but I remembered to. No, it means what? Mow the lawn. The positive is mow the lawn. And you got to find up some reason and some excuse why you didn't do it. You know, and that it probably won't work, but it's worth a try. So, yeah. Our mowers broke down a lot. That was our best excuse, but that's.
In the first few, he's basically resetting the foundation, resetting the who he is and why you better listen to the rest of it.
And it's important because for a lot of reasons, but one reason that's important is while Moses is up on the mountain, what are they doing down in the valley? And what do they say about the golden calf? This is the God that brought you up out of Israel. So they see the Exodus as their birthday in a sense. You know, this is where we came into as a nation, and to honor our father or whatever is to honor the God who brought us out of Egypt. And so if it's the God up on the mountain here with Moses, that's one thing. If it's the golden calf we just made, it's another thing. So God is saying, it's me. And so, you know, there's this introductory statement, verses 2, and I guess just verse 2, is not, maybe doesn't contain a specific commandment that helps us get us down to 10. You could have 16 or 17 coming out of this, depending on how you look at it. But it kind of is a commandment too, though, isn't it? In some understandings, in some traditions, some interpretations, it is considered a commandment. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. That doesn't sound like a commandment, but it is. Believe I am the Lord your God who brought you up. Remember that I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. Yeah, don't forget. Hi, Robin. So, everybody's fighting over your apples right now, Robin. Thanks a lot. Thanks for sending. Connie's winning right now, I think. She'll throw a mean elbow if she wants something. So, So there's that, we're setting the term. Why can God kind of assert this authority over Israel? Why can't he tell them, this is how you're going to live? And if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to kill you.
Because I'm the one that brought you out of Egypt.
I brought you into this world. I can take you out of it. And that's,
I was gonna wait a week or two before I brought
yeah.
that up.
And
Yeah.
they have accepted. They have gone into this. They've already said all that the Lord said we will do. So, and as we mentioned then, they're kind of binding their children and their grandchildren and perpetually their descendants. We look at our faith and our relationship as a matter of choice, as a matter of learning the truth, accepting the truth, deciding to obey the truth. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turn around, whatever. That's not the Israel story, though, is it? Israel's story is you were born a Jew. How did I become a child of God? Well, if you're a little boy, maybe the first time you remember going to the bathroom, you're reminded, I'm a Jew. That's different. That's not our story. The authority God has to place these commandments on Israel comes from the fact that he brought them up out of Egypt, that he delivered them from slavery. How did they end up in Egypt in the first place? He kind of sent them down there, didn't he?
You got their attention.
There's a title on Mary that some people are very uncomfortable with as being the mother of God, because Jesus is God. Jesus was in marriage. Mary was his mother. She's the mother of God, they say. It doesn't bother me. It bothers some people. Egypt is the mother of Israel, really. And God sends the seed of Israel, the family, the household of Jacob, into Egypt, where they gestate for a long time, for centuries. And then by pain and the shedding of blood, they are expelled out of Egypt. And they are born through water and all that into their national identity. So, Jesus draws on, the mother having child labor pains and all that stuff as well. So this is, Egypt is in a sense the mother of Israel. And God is their father. But God says, I'm the one who brought you out, so I'm going to tell you what to do. This is called a Decalogue. This means 10 words, or really more 10 statements, 10 thoughts. And there's other Decalogues in the Bible. The handout has a list of a few. But this one uniquely comes directly from God, saying, I am God. I am the one saying these things. So it has that kind of additional authority on it. And again, the term Decalogue, 10 words, that depends on how you look at it, really. And I don't think that it's meant to be so much 10 as it is. It's helpful for us for it to be 10. But 10 was an important number in Jewish symbology. It was another number of completion, like 7, like 12. 10 was complete. There were 10 commandments, so it's a number of completion. Okay, let's look at the first commandment specifically. Verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me.
A thing doesn't have to be a god for us to make it a god. We can take something in our lives and raise it up to a godlike thing in our life, but the person next to him doesn't see it as a god, because the thing itself is not what's wrong. It's how we're treating it. And so we have to make sure that we don't treat things as gods, because we have the one God.
We live in what is quickly becoming an atheistic society. So they would say they don't have gods, but they do have something that motivates the way they do their thing in life every day.
Like if someone wanted to go golfing every Sunday morning instead of coming to church, they made golfing their God. But the guy that did it on Saturday afternoon for a couple hours, it wasn't a God to him.
I don't know who you're talking about there, Thelma, but I haven't played in 3 years.
He can't hear it, so it's okay.
Well, I
Okay.
don't know anyone that golfs, so I wasn't predicting it.
Well, there's a lot of people who fish, and they'll go on Sunday morning and say, well, that's when the fish are running or whatever. So it was really a thing in Aberdeen. We had to, when the salmon run was on, it's on when it's on. So, but I think kind of maybe more than a specific sport or something like that, a lot of people are driven by their careers. The career matters more than anything else. A lot of people are desirous of accumulating as much money as they possibly can. And that becomes their number one motivating factor in life. There was a guy, and he was kind of crazy, but I liked him over in Issaquah. And he said, money doesn't drive people, sex drives people. And why does a guy want money? So he can buy the car to get the girl, and that's why he does all that. So that was his. Maybe that was his deal. I don't know. Maybe he was telling me something. So I think a lot of these things, a lot of the things that are good, I wouldn't say golf comes from God, because it does lead to the taking of the name of the Lord in vain, perhaps. But a lot of these things which are good and they come from God become God's. It is a blessing that comes from the Lord, and then it becomes a God to us, and that's kind of some of the subsequent commandments address that. And that's us turning God's blessings into curses, really. We take what is good, what God gives us, things like a job, which is purpose in life, marriage, which involves sex, money that comes from our working and things like all these good things that God gives us. We turn the thing itself into God, and all of a sudden there's no room for God anymore. We're just going after that one thing. And it's a path to destruction. In Israel's context, they are going to be surrounded by polytheistic pagan cultures. They're going to be surrounded by people who have gods of the hills, gods of the mountains, gods of the hill valleys, gods of the harvest, gods of the planting, gods of the rain, gods of the stop raining, gods of everything, and gods of fertility, both of the land and of the wives, all this stuff. And so it would be nice if the Bible said there are no other gods, period. They don't exist. You don't have them. Instead, it says, for us, there is no other God. And for Israel, there is to be no other God. Your neighbors may have Baals and other gods in their house. Israel, even some of their people have little household gods that get fleshed out as the story unfolds. But God is asking for them to practice. He's commanding them to practice monotheism, even if it's not really what's in their heart. Even if they don't really at this point believe that there is only one God. Act like it's only one God. Act like it. Fake it till you make it kind of thing. And, it's a good, people sometimes will say, I can't remember who it was complaining about their neighbor. I guess it was, I'm not going to name her name on the word internet, but there was a young lady here who was complaining about one of her neighbors and how hard it is to love your neighbor. Well, it can be. You may not feel like you love your neighbor, But if you act like you love your neighbor, you treat that person like you love them, eventually you will come to love them.
I'm talking about that love thy neighbor.
Mhm.
And my daughter from Utah got talking to my neighbor and told her she couldn't leave the garbage can out because I couldn't bring it in because it fell on me once. And so she enticed him a little bit to be mad at me. And so he would always stand up because I sat in the window looking out. And so he sees me, and so he's obviously thinking I'm watching him. So the other day I said something to him. He would open his garage door at the same time I was bringing my garbage barrel over. I'd go to eat. And I said to him, I said, hey, over there, how about cutting that noise down a little bit? And he said, are you really meaning that? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm joking. And he said, oh, that's good. And ever since we did, he come over and look at Nell's truck, and he got talking. And now he had his son coming over and picking my garbage and putting it back up for me.
There you go.
And so now he likes me a little bit. So we're fine.
It helps when you put your pistol down too, doesn't it? That's made things seem to go a little bit better.
We took the vote.
So it's not loaded. Come on.
Yes, it
See,
is.
you're- to the point you were making earlier, no other gods before me. And again, it's going to, I see it as reminding them where his place is, or where his place should be in their lives and in their, I mean, you know, I'm the one who saved you, and so I need to be your priority. Everything you do, it sounds funny to us, everything you do needs to be about me. And we take that the wrong way, but that's basically what it is.
Well, when you put God first, then it shapes how you change, how you do everything else in life.
Right.
And so, you know, the kind of dispute over whether it's you shall have no other gods before me or you shall have no other gods besides me. Is God first or behind another God? Is God tied with another God? Neither one. I mean, he's number one, and there is no 1A, 1B, 1C. There's no really no number two. There's no three. You know, it's all way on down. But you are supposed to be absolutely loyal to God. And whether or not there are actually other gods, not for you, they're not. You know, other people may believe what they believe. That's their business. And God has, and the thing is, you read the Old Testament, God has relationships with these other nations that are not worship Him exclusively. God has a relationship with Egypt and Pharaoh. God has a relationship with Nebuchadnezzar. God has, you know, He sends messages. He sends Jonah to the Assyrian Empire. So and Assyria was as wicked as they came. So God engages these other nations. He has the oracle of nations that He sends out and says, this is why I'm judging you and why I'm condemning you. God has Israel be subjugated to these other pagan nations at times to punish them. Not because they're worse than those nations, maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but they weren't what God wanted them to be, and that was enough. It wasn't enough for me to tell my dad, hey, Dad, you know, I'm better than our neighbor's kid, you know. That wasn't the standard to which I was being held. I was being held to being my dad's kids. And, you know, I got a grade that wasn't exactly what I was capable of. Well, it didn't matter that I beat some of the students in the class, you know. I beat the kid that sat in the back and ate glue the whole time. Maybe I wasn't last, you know. That's not good enough. So for God, He has a special relationship with Israel, and that will control how they interact with each other. Okay. I am not completely on my A game today. I feel okay, but I'm not great. So at this point, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll get into the second commandment next week, and I will be ready to take on the world next Wednesday, I hope. So thank you for your attention and your comments. Mr. Cole, will you lead us in closing prayer?